A UN Emergency Peace Service is both an idea and an initiative to address the UN's four biggest long-standing challenges, which currently it can't manage. It can't really prevent armed conflict. It has a very difficult time protecting civilians. It's not capable of rapid deployment, and as a result, it can't really address human needs in complex emergencies. So this is a critical gap filler. It entails it's really a civil society project. It started within government. Within the aftermath of Rwanda, the federal government commissioned an in-depth year-long study into the requirements of a UN standing force. I was designated as one office of primary responsibility within that initiative. That subsequently turned into a multinational initiative of 28 diverse member states who agreed to participate in the Friends of Rapid Deployment. It's a multidimensional, meaning military, police, and civilian, and it's multifunctional. It's designed for the diverse tasks, four tasks primarily: prevention, protection, rapid deployment, and addressing human needs in complex emergencies. To date, there is no capacity to respond quickly to emerging conflicts, and as a result, they tend to escalate and spread before the United Nations can even establish a presence. And the UN's response times have slowed. Instead of the rapid deployment that we formerly expected, it now takes 6 to 12 months to even begin mission startup and to deploy multinational forces. It's a very slow and semi-dysfunctional system because we have to borrow from the resources that are available that member states have, and all governments worldwide tend to delay when there are risks, and they want to know the conditions under which they deploy. They want to know who they deploy with. They always stipulate national caveats and are very reluctant to use force in peace operations abroad. Here we have an easy option. We can dial 911 and assume that the appropriate help will come within minutes. Elsewhere, the situation is far worse, where individuals, communities, even entire countries can't count on any help whatsoever when their sons and daughters may be actually under attack. And to date, there's been a very strong reluctance to go toward a UN force, and that was even conveyed in workshops and global symposiums worldwide, that the notion of a UN army wasn't attractive. What's distinct is that you have a peace service specifically designed to help, rather than an army is usually designed to take ground and hold ground and to overwhelm and defeat an opposition. And I think we have ample capacity with respect to armies worldwide, but they can't address or resolve many of the conflicts that are underway. So what's distinct about a UNEPS is that it has small teams that provide very useful services. You have conflict resolution specialists, you have disaster assistance specialists, you have police, you have an array of peace building, quick impact project teams, you have formed police formations, as well as, what you would consider a discrete force within a brigade group under a mission headquarters, which is relatively robust and capable of handling the requirements of a demanding peace operation. But it's not a warfighting mechanism. It certainly isn't something that one would have to worry is likely to be the harbinger of sort of a New World Army. It's not that. It's distinctly designed to help. UNEPS would be a standalone entity under a operational headquarters with 2 mobile mission headquarters at a distinct UN base, and it would be a standing formation rather than the standby ones that we now have to rely on that take 6 months to a year to get into the field. So it would be constantly in preparation and training for an operation, or deployed into an operation, or in recuperation and rest and recovery from an operation. So it would be consistently employed in preparing for the variety of very demanding tasks the UN currently has but can't address. So it would fill a very large gap in our collective security capacity. It can only really be implemented when you have higher political will driving it. Now, we've seen that, and that will has been evident on at least 7 occasions over the last 100 years. We saw it in the aftermath of the Cold War. 4 of the 5 P5 members, the Security Council members, were all proposing a UN rapid deployment force. So there have been occasions, not only after the Cold War, after the Rwandan genocide, after Srebrenica, and after the Korean War. The list goes on of occasions where the political will has been there, but the prior preparation, the planning, hasn't. There has been no decent idea that might mobilize countries to say, okay, let's pick up and run with this. And in the absence of the idea, they consistently farm out studies and commissions, which take several years to develop, and then the interest is dissipated, so the focus is elsewhere, and it's back to business and war as usual. So we're hoping that we see a wider network of NGOs active in this particular field, that we see cooperation between the broad community within the responsibility to protect network, and many of their leaders have shifted toward UNEPS. And we're hoping to see some governments who are more progressive begin to pick up and run with the idea. And now I think we have a rather compelling concept. We have a decent blueprint and a growing constituency of support. And the most promising part of that is really the recent shift of some very eminent leaders within the R2P community now backing a United Nations Emergency Peace Service. And we have a network of very senior peace researchers and individuals with backgrounds prominent in conflict resolution and in the UN who have said that we really do have to drive this urgently, and that's encouraging. The United Nations, in its most recent high-level panel on peace operations, and the Secretary General, in his report, The Future of Peace Operations, suggested we shift away from those distinct terms and try and converge on peace operations, and that peace building, peacekeeping, peacemaking, and even peace enforcement can be subsumed within peace operations. I tend to think that that's correct. Now, there's also a very big distinction between warfighting and peace enforcement in a UN operation that's sometimes seldom understood. In very difficult circumstances, the UN will take the tactical offensive, but that does not mean that it becomes a warfighting entity. It's simply to stop spoilers and to advance the prospects of a peaceful process. That's far different than a warfighting force. And UNEPS has indicated it has an array of services really designed to help address human needs first and foremost. So developing the means to help is, I think, distinctly critically important for the future, because we're likely to see more and more overlapping crises, not only from many have considered climate change to be really the ultimate threat multiplier. We know there's also a large concern over competition over resources and diminishing resources. Global militarization has increased the access and availability of weapons worldwide, and increasing inequality. More and more people are desperate, and they recognize that their prospects are limited. So extremism and violent conflict, unfortunately, is not fading, and the incidence of interstate conflict, war, has declined, but internal conflict has gone up rather significantly over the last 8 years. And the UN is currently stretched to its limits. It can't provide promptly the resources required to deal with most of the operations it currently runs. So as a result, we're seeing 50 to 60 million refugees moving from war-torn countries over the past year. And we know that situation is not really going to improve. With climate change and projected models, we know that low-lying areas are going to be very heavily hit, that the prospects of disease increase, the prospects of proliferation of arms increase, and when these are in weak and failed states, the incidence of armed conflict goes up significantly as people become more desperate. So our future isn't entirely comforting, and the United Nations should be better prepared to handle its assigned tasks. And I truly do believe we have to make sure that organization is ready and prepared for the future. And to date, we've left too much to too little. Worse than the 6 to 12 month deployment time, it also takes now 2 to 3 years simply to establish a UN base and mission headquarters, which is a ludicrously long amount of time. You can imagine when a conflict erupts, it's best to nip it in the bud before it escalates, spreads, and becomes far larger and more violent. Well, we don't have that capacity, and UNEPS is really designed to address it. It would be nice to have enlightened political leadership help to drive the initiative for a United Nations Emergency Peace Service. We need help to make this happen, and we know that the Security Council needs a big project to restore cooperation and faith and hope in the organization. We've allowed fatalistic cynicism and austerity to diminish hope worldwide. It's time to restore the vision as well as the support and the idealism that helped us develop this organization, and to make it work as it was intended. It should be able to prevent armed conflict, protect civilians, respond rapidly to address human needs. That's not too much to ask for. Thank you.